Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at the 2024 Arizona Senate election and specifically why I think this race could easily end up being one of the most unpredictable, ambiguous, and just crazy Senate races we've seen in a very long time. This is going to be a rather weird race to say the least, and that's because like all weird races, or like most of them at least, it's a three-way race. We could potentially see up to three major candidates running and getting over 10% of the vote, and that would, by my definition, make it a competitive three-way election. So, going to be a Democrat who's likely to be current Representative Ruben Gallego, who's going to be a Republican, and then if incumbent Senator Kyrsten Sinema runs, she'll be running as an independent. And so now she might not run. We don't have any ideas yet. A lot of people think she won't run, but for the purposes of this video, let's assume she's going to run. Let's assume we do indeed have that weird three-way race between a Democrat, a Republican, and an independent. So let's talk about it. Obviously, Kyrsten Sinema, like I said, she's the incumbent senator who could run as an independent. She was elected in 2018 as a Democrat, but since Joe Biden was, elected president, since he's been attempting to legislate with a Democratic Congress, Sinema's been not too reliable of a vote for Democrats. She still is closer to a Democrat than a Republican. In terms of a voting record, but she really clashed with the party on a lot of issues, and from what I've heard, she's not really well liked by congressional Democrats. She's easily, I would say, the most confusing member of the Democratic caucus, more so than Manchin, because Manchin is actually generally well liked by his colleagues and is from a much better state than Sinema. And so, for that reason, she left the party. She is an independent for now, and again, we don't know if she'll run for re-election, but purposes of this video, let's assume she does. She would likely do best with moderate voters or centrist voters, or if we do indeed see a Gallego versus Kerry Lake matchup, which Kerry Lake is likely to get in this race, and she is the failed nominee for governor in 2022. She lost to Katie Hobbs. She is, I would say, a pretty subpar candidate for the Republicans in terms of electability. If it's her versus Gallego, I would imagine there would be a good amount of moderates, centrists, independents who are attracted to voting for Sinema just because they would rather not vote for Kerry Lake or maybe Ruben Gallego. Now, obviously, Ruben Gallego is someone who I think would do better with independents and moderates than Kerry Lake. I think without Sinema in the race, he would probably be in a better spot with them. But again, Sinema would likely take away those votes from him if she was in the race. And, when you look at exit polls, you can see how this hurts Democrats. If you look at the most recent Senate race, Kelly versus Masters, Democrats won that by just under 5%. Party ID, independents back Mark Kelly by 16%, and moderates back Mark Kelly by 30%. So definitely a very, very concerning trend for Democrats if they're, if we do end up seeing a conservative, an independent candidate taking away votes from them among moderate voters and independent voters, both of which are demographics Mark Kelly needed to beat Blake Masters with. Because again, when you take away independents, there's more Republicans and Democrats in Arizona. If you take away moderates, there's much more conservatives than there are liberals in Arizona. So moderates, independents, they're an integral part of the Democratic coalition when they're winning Arizona. And for that reason, I'm definitely going to say that initially did look like Sinema was going to take away votes from Ruben Gallego, but it's not what's been happening. If you look at the latest polls we've seen, Sinema doesn't really have that much of an effect on Gallego. Obviously, he's at a lower vote share. He's at 37%, which isn't too great, but he's 12 points ahead of Wright. He's beating Lamb by 7%, even with Sinema in the race, and he is beating Lamb by 8% in this poll. And then if you go to the polls with Jim Layman, who also ran, beating Layman by 16, he's beating Kerry Lake by 7, which is the most likely matchup, and he's at 42 against her. So really, initially, what might have appeared to be a spoiler for Democrats could actually be a spoiler for Republicans, which is really weird because, again, Sinema's never run as a Republican. She's never been a Republican, but her favorables with Republicans are higher than they are among Democrats. And in the polls, every single poll you've seen, Sinema's hurting the Republican candidate more than Ruben Gallego, and that is really weird. So we're going to kind of just briefly go through this here. I'm not going to take too long to explain my kind of early thoughts on this race, but I do want to look at some of the results from last year. We can also look at the governor's races, which I will actually do right now in another tab, but we'll start with the Senate. And so what I will say about the Senate race is that Kelly winning by 5 is a good result. It's not a result that I think Gallego can necessarily he can, but I don't think it's most likely outcome for him to replicate. But we could see a margin of victory similar. And so that I know that sounds like I contradicted myself, but again, if you consider the fact that Sinema's running, maybe we see Gallego win by 5, maybe like 47-42, and then Sinema would take I don't know, the remaining 11%. And that would obviously be a 5-point margin of victory, but Gallego would be getting to 51.5. So Sinema, I would assume, would do best in Maricopa County. That's the most moderate swing county of the state. Kelly won it by 6, just under 100,000 vote difference between him and Blake Masters there, which was a really big margin for Democrats. It was almost his entire statewide margin. So that's definitely huge for the Democratic Party and their chance of winning statewide in Arizona. So if you assume that the Democratic or that Sinema would take away votes from the Democratic nominee Gallego, that would maybe hurt Democrats in Maricopa. But when you look at these counties where we saw Republicans do well, the best is Yuma County, where Masters really should not have done that well. He won by 6, despite the fact the state trended like 5% to the left, and he ran even with Trump despite that. So maybe we see a couple thousand independent or moderate voters in Yuma County switching from the Republicans to Kyrsten Sinema. Similar thing in Cochise County, which was another county where Kelly did pretty well, actually. But again, it's kind of random. I feel like the distribution among the state or around the state is going to be really weird to predict, because when you look at the way independents vote in different areas, it's always very different. A prime example of this is if you go to Pennsylvania, which was a key swing state in 2020. I remember this was a big argument against polling back in 2020. They would, pollsters would ask independents maybe outside of Philadelphia or outside of Pittsburgh how they were voting, and they would say, I'm voting for Biden. But then you'd ask an independent in rural Pennsylvania, they'd say, I'm voting for Trump. So independents are very different. Even if it's in the same state, they can vote different ways. And so an independent voter in the suburbs of Phoenix might vote, like a Sinema voter in the suburbs of Phoenix might be more likely to vote for Gallego than Lake if Sinema was not on the ballot. And then if you go down to the border region, an independent voting for Sinema might be more likely to vote for her might be more likely to vote for Kerry Lake than Gallego. So it's a complicated topic. It's hard to predict, but I think a geographic divide among independent voters, among moderate voters, among voters who aren't decided, how they're going to vote next year, that's another key topic to look at. But I do want to look at the governor elections from 2022, specifically Katie Hobbs versus Kerry Lake. This was a race that the Republicans were expected to win, and Lake only lost by 17,000 votes, so it was definitely close, but she was ahead in almost every pre-election poll in the final weeks of the campaign. She was really had all the momentum in that race. Katie Hobbs was, running a textbook bad campaign, and I still stand by that, but clearly she did win, so she did enough. But let's just talk about these margins compared to the Senate race. So Kerry Lake did actually outrun Blake Masters in Maricopa. She only lost it by 2. She actually lost by around half the margin he did, so that's a decently impressive showing. But again, kind of because down-ballot lag is a thing, right? Like when you look at how Senate elections in Arizona have been for the previous few years, Democrats won 2018 and 2020, and they also won 2022. For the governor's races, Republicans won by 14 points in 2018, and they lost by 0.6 in 2022. So governor's races, down-ballot races in Arizona are always just a bit more Republican-leaning than federal races, and that's why we saw Joe Biden flip the state in 2020. That's why we saw Hillary Clinton come close to winning it in 2016. But Democrats were not competitive down ballot in governor's races and state legislative races until 2022 in this case. So again, Lake did outrun Masters in most counties, but not really by anything considerable. I talked about Yuma County. She did pretty well there. She won it by double the amount Masters did. But still, it's really important to look just at the distribution of independent voters. Kerry Lake, I think, is electorally toxic. I want to make that clear. She lost a very winnable race against a pretty, an opponent who I think on the surface might have been a good opponent, but did not really run that disciplined or that good of a campaign. And on top of that, something you have to remember, this is always important, Kerry Lake has a very strong base of voters. She has her base. Now, it's never enough to win an election in Arizona. She actually did, this might be her best showing ever, because she got 49.7% of the vote. That might be the best that might be the closest she ever comes to winning office in Arizona. But again, she has that 43%, that 44% that will vote for her no matter what, and that is important in a three-way matchup. So I would say, if you ask me to characterize how this is going, a lot of people really think Sinema is dooming Republicans. I don't think so just yet. I think it's too early to tell. I think recent signs for Democrats have been encouraging. There's no denying that. And if I'm Gallego, I'm feeling better my chances now than I was maybe 2 or 3 months ago. But here's what I will say. It is a dangerous game to play, hoping for a third-party spoiler, because they can always come and affect you in a way you did not think was possible. So that's my take on the Sinema situation. I still think Democrats are narrowly favored to win Arizona if I had to guess, but wait truly to tell. This is probably the most interesting Senate race of 2024 as of right now. So thank you for watching again. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'll see you all in the next one.